Good morning, Philadelphia. How are you? Okay, so I talk about participatory budgeting, so I hope that y'all are ready to participate. My name is Shari Davis. I'm the co-executive director of the Participatory Budgeting Project, and we believe in transparency, so I'm going to tell you all the truth. I am a recovering government employee. I worked in local government for 15 years, and I like to start with that for one reason. Working in government is hard. Shout out to the people that do it, and shout out to the folks that help them. I'm sure that there are a couple of government employees in this room. Your work is important, and people probably don't tell you that enough. And the reason why I can say that, and I mention this, I worked in government for 15 years, so some of you may be wondering, how old is this child on the stage? I turned 32 in a couple weeks. So that means I started working in government when I was a teenager. That means I had a chance to do some really cool things. Raise your hand if you believe that government is perfect right now. Not many hands went up. Raise your hand if you believe that government can change. A few hands, a lot of them. Raise your hand if you've been a part of government change. Probably somewhere around a third of the room. Now, the work that I do is to make sure that when I ask that question, everyone in the room raises their hand. And part of why I believe that, is because of my story. So when I started working in Boston, Massachusetts, this is very cold, that's why I moved to Oakland, California. But when I started working in Boston, Massachusetts, I worked for Mayor Menino. And he was a 20-year incumbent. He was the only mayor I knew. But this was a mayor that raised me. He really believed in youth voice and youth leadership. And so I found myself with a summer job as a teenager, working in the mayor's office. And after a couple weeks, your summer job is supposed to be over. And so they told me, thank you for a great summer. Come back another time. And I said, nope, I work here now. And I kept coming to work. And after a while, they hired me. And I was like, whew, that worked out. And the mayors kept asking me questions. Well, what do you think we should do? And why should this be this way? And maybe you should talk to this department head. So by the time I was 18 years old, I thought that the way government was supposed to work was that they were supposed to listen to young people. It just made sense. That was all I knew. In my early 20s, I had an opportunity to begin overseeing that summer employment program I told you about, and a lot of the other programs that raised me in government. Somewhere in my mid-20s, I had an opportunity to create a division in government. And the way that I did this was kind of ask for forgiveness and not permission, which I don't recommend. But I ended up creating this division in government. It was called the Division of Youth Engagement and Employment. I put 4,000 young people to work every year with 250 nonprofit partners. I created a space where young people could learn from other young people how to be successful in their place of employment. I oversaw a resource center that was run by youth and for youth, with everything from cheap date ideas to how to find a tutor. I also had an opportunity to do one other thing, and that was to oversee civic engagement initiatives for young people. Boston has one of the best mayor's youth councils in the world, and I had a chance to grow that program, really create a one-stop shop for young people in the city. It was in that role that I launched the country's first youth-focused participatory budgeting effort, where 12 to 25-year-olds decided on $1 million of the city's capital budget. I was blown away by this work. I had seen so many things and had been involved in so many different opportunities for real youth engagement, but I had never seen anything quite like this. And so when I say participatory budgeting, I'm talking about a democratic process where community members have an opportunity to decide directly how a portion of public funds are spent. And let me quickly explain how this works. The first phase, which I think is the most important, is when we design the process. This is a process designed with community. Community designs this process together alongside agencies. Whether it's in a school, whether it's in a local government, whether it's in a household, or whether it's in some other institution. We design the process together, write a rule book, so we come through on transparency, and everyone knows how the process is going to work. Then, we go out and collect hundreds, if not thousands of ideas on how to spend a portion of funds. Then we enter the phase of participatory budgeting, and I'll say PB so I don't stumble over these syllables. But then we enter the phase of PB where we develop all of those ideas into proposals. We vet them, we put price tags on them. We work alongside agency staff to ensure that anything that makes it on the final ballot can really happen if people vote for it. And then we enter the voting phase. And unlike a traditional local or national election, the PB vote goes out to where people are. At the very beginning, we think about what our goals are, who we really want to deeply engage. Sometimes that's the most marginalized people in community, the hardest to reach, but the easiest to ignore. And so in order to set up a process where they're at the center of engagement, they have to be involved in the design. And so we go to local transit stops, and really wherever that steering committee that wrote the rules says that we have to be in order to collect a vote from those folks. The projects with the most votes really get implemented in community. So when I did this work in Boston, we were seeing really amazing things like art walls. And folks said this will not only keep our community safer, but this will be an opportunity to connect with art in a way that's meaningful. So folks were putting graffiti in places and then getting an encounter with the criminal justice system, but now they had a place to canvas their art where it would be beautiful, respected, and where another artist could come and canvas theirs. We saw opportunities to increase Wi-Fi access because young people said, in order for me to be successful in school and in life, I need to be able to engage. And then they said, not only do I need increased Wi-Fi access, we need to build applications so that I can search for a job, so that I can find things to do easier. And we did all of that. Then we had this really interesting spillover effect. I mentioned in Boston we had capital funds. So we had a ton of ideas that weren't eligible for the funding. They said, we want to change the employment program. And I said, great. But those ideas we can't fund with this particular PB process. And they said, fine, but can you take my idea and change the employment program anyway? And we absolutely did that. So we had an opportunity not only to fund things, but to understand community spending priorities, align them with government spending priorities, and make better decisions for everyone in that space. And so I love to bring up this slide in particular. Young people that engaged in participatory budgeting reported a couple things: that they were more likely to vote in local and national elections, that they were more likely to volunteer for a community-based organization, that they were more likely to step in to a government-owned facility than they ever were before. So what does that mean for the long arc of change, for the long arc of civic engagement, for building muscle so that everyone has an opportunity to participate, but really so that we can build more leaders that understand government, understand how to interact with it, and can make better decisions for folks that live in community. We're talking about a process that's equitable and that marries content expertise and context expertise. If I was going to build a building, I wouldn't want it to fall down. I would get an expert. I would get an architect. But if we are to build healthy communities, we need experts. We need people that live in that community every day to be a part of the decisions that are made in that community so that they work. We also need to expand what political participation looks like. So imagine that young person in Boston, by the time they're 18, they've had an opportunity to engage deeply in government decisions for years. What kind of decisions are going to be made at that point? The last thing that I'll say, because I'm running out of time, and they told me that the ceiling would collapse if I didn't finish on time. The last thing that I'll say is, so often we talk about young people as future leaders, and I think that everyone has a role to play when we talk about building healthy communities. But I think we have to stop thinking about young people as future leaders. They are leaders right now. And it's our job to arm them with the resources and opportunities so that they can really step into the potential of their leadership. Ultimately, this is about breaking down barriers, changing the conversation from us versus them to a we conversation so that we have better relationships to make better decisions together. If you want to take a picture of a slide, this is a wonderful slide to take a picture of. Philly, thank you so much for having me and learning about participatory budgeting. I hope that this is an idea that you consider, but one that you share. Thank you very much. And a picture.